Jesus was speaking to his disciples. He was calling them to love one another. He called us to love our neighbor or our enemy, but here he calls us to love each other, to love other Christians, to love the people sitting near to us in the pews today. At first blush, that seems easy enough. If you have been here long enough to get acquainted, you know people who you find it easy to love. If you glance around the congregation, you see people for whom you have genuine affection. That makes sense. You expect to meet nice people in church, and we have some very nice people here this morning. Members of other churches who came to visit today. Members from the Cursillo community. In such company, love one another doesn't seem all that difficult until you get involved. If you just sit in the pew on Sunday morning and enjoy light conversation at coffee hour, you will find people whom you meet here to be quite pleasant. But once you get involved, that won't always be the case. Polite conversation over a cup of coffee is one thing. Working together in the trenches is another. As long as we can avoid talking about politics and religion, in other words, as long as we can avoid talking about anything important, we can scarcely offend or be offended. Safe conversations. There is something to be said for safe conversation. It gives us an opportunity to interact with other people without stepping on anyone's toes. It allows us to enjoy and to be enjoyed. It gives us a chance to get acquainted, at least at a surface level. It is a place to start, but life would be boring if that were all the further our conversations could go. We enjoy super conversation, but we also feel a need for something deeper, for sharing feelings and values, for talking about things that really matter. There is a risk in that. There is a risk in unsafe conversation. There is risk in unsafe love. Some time ago, a friend whose politics are opposite to mine made a remark that I couldn't let pass. My temper got the better of me, and I said some things that I regret. I hurt her, and she hurt me. I haven't seen or spoken to that friend since. Unsafe conversation, unsafe love. Jesus said, love one another. It isn't easy, but if unsafe conversation has the potential to injure, it also has the potential to heal. Let me give you an example. You say, good morning. How are you today? The other person says, well, I am all right now. The other day, a young woman came to church. She's not a member of the church, but she needed help. I asked her, how are you? She answered, I'm okay. Now you can see the difference. When we are interacting with someone, you would expect from that other person to ask you back, what about you? How are you? In this specific case with this young woman, I continued, tell me more about it. She hesitated, but I was patient, and my body language showed I was available for her. I indicated her with my availability that she was the center of the world, and I was there to honor that precious moment. I opened a safe and healthy space for her so she could be liberated from her load. She's a well-articulate young woman. I gave her the validation she needed and used words to build her spirit and empower her to see her beauty despite her brokenness and unworthiness. Most importantly, I helped her to realize that she was God's beloved because she was a daughter of God. It was a moment of fulfillment in ministry for me because she confessed to me she had suicidal thoughts. I was used by God to restore her self-esteem. I took a risk and gave her the number I use for church matters and emergencies, my church's cell number. She called me the next day and came to church afterwards. She's a testimony of a holy conversation. We had the kind of conversation that can help someone to talk about what is really important, in this case, a healing conversation. Jesus said, love one another. Sometimes love just requires listening, caring. But sometimes it can be much more costly. There is a song from Tina Turner. What's love got to do with it? Who needs a heart when a heart could be broken? We want the rules of love to play safe. And we get attached to do it. This is unsafe love. C.S. Lewis reminds us that there is the act of love. Do not waste time wondering whether you love another. Act as if you do. Jesus says, love one another. He was speaking to his disciples, telling them to love the other disciples. He wasn't calling them to feel affection, but to act in loving ways. We might not always be able to feel affection for another person, but we can always act kindly toward them. Jesus says, love one another. He's speaking to us, telling us to love other Christians, to act kindly toward other Christians. He's calling us to act kindly even towards those Christians that we don't understand, because according to my gospel, they don't behave as such. Sometimes that's easy, sometimes it isn't. When Jesus calls us to love one another, he's calling us to love the one who brought the flowers for the altar, but he's calling us to love the person who wounded us with their sharp tongue. When Jesus calls us to love one another, he's calling us to love the nice person with whom we talk at coffee hour, but he's also calling us to love the person who opposes our ideas and who blocks the realization of our dream. When Jesus calls us to love one another, he's calling us to love our Sunday school teachers, but he's also calling us to love the person who slanders us behind our back. When Jesus calls us to love one another, he's calling us to love those who bring goodies for coffee hour, but he's also calling us to love the person who is afflicted with constipation of the brain and diarrhea of the mouth. When Jesus calls us to love one another, he's calling us to love the kid who works hard and gets good grades. But he's calling us to love the kid who smokes joints behind the church building. When Jesus calls us to love one another, He's calling us to bear witness, to show the world to what He has done for us. Who is Christ calling you to love today? What is He calling you to do about it? Amen.